So welcome everybody. Really great to see you this evening. Thanks for coming along. So for anyone who hasn't joined us before, this is the Latin American Ethnography Seminar. The seminar series is run by CLACS, which is the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies at the School of Advanced Studies at the University of London. And it's currently a collaboration between CLACS and CROLAC, which is the Center for Research on Latin America and the Caribbean at Queen Mary, University of London, the University of Aberdeen, and also the Spanish National Research Council. So the seminar has been running for more than a decade, in the old days it was in person at Senate House, CLACS' home in London. But since the pandemic, we've been online, which has been really great because it's meant we've been able to reach to a much broader audience, especially across Latin America and the Caribbean, which has been great. If you have participated in our seminars before, you may have noticed that we've quite recently changed our name this year from the Latin American Anthropology Seminar to the Latin American Ethnography Seminar. And that's because we've become a more interdisciplinary team, and we're really interested in encouraging the participation of colleagues as both speakers and attendants who use ethnography as a research method in Latin America, even if they're not anthropologists as such. So we're three coordinators that jointly run the seminar. I'm Jessie Sclair, I'm at Queen Mary. Denise Roman, who is here with us today at the University of Aberdeen, and also Ainhoa Montoya from the Spanish Research Council and CLACS, who sadly is on fieldwork and didn't have enough internet to log on today to our session, but she's usually here. We're currently running monthly on Thursdays at 5 p.m. UK time. And our next seminar, which will be the last one for this academic year, will be on the 7th of March. And I'm just going to post information about that in the chat because it would be lovely if any of you wanted to join us. I'll do that in just a minute. But meanwhile, I'm delighted to welcome our speaker today, Natalia Valdivieso-Kastner from the University of Manchester. And Natalia's paper is called The Ecotheopolitics of a Greener Faith, the Catholic Church's Quest for Environmental Justice in the Amazon. So Natalia will speak for around 30 minutes, 40 max, and then we'll open up for questions following that, and we'll aim to finish around 6 p.m. UK time. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise hand function available on Zoom. And I'll ask you then to unmute your microphone. Or if you think of a question while Natalia's speaking, please feel free to post that in the chat before the end of her talk, and we'll take that when she's finished. We're also recording Natalia's talk, which we'll post on the CLACS website after on, but we won't be recording the questions, so don't worry about being recorded yourself. Okay, so really delighted to have you with us, Natalia. I will pass over to you, and yeah, about half an hour or 40 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to start by sharing my presentation. Just to make sure, can everyone see it? Great. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for being here today. So the paper that I will be presenting today stems from one of the chapters of my PhD thesis, which in broader term investigated the implications of religion, politics, and ecology in the Amazon basin. So I will start by giving an overview of the historical context of my research field. So I conducted fieldwork in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon from 2019 to 2021, mainly with a group of Catholic consecrated missionaries. That means that they are priests and nuns from different religious orders. There are members of the Vicariate of Aguarico. They are mainly based in this city town in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon called Coca. And this is located in the province of Orellana in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. So I looked at their involvement in the socio-environmental conflicts in the area associated with extractive industry. So that's fossil fuels, unlicensed mining, timber extraction, and agribusiness. So the northern Ecuadorian Amazon has historically been considered a marginal area and has posed various challenges to state governance, mainly for two reasons. On the one hand, its geographical isolation, and on the second, this region has been subject of various territorial disputes between Ecuador and Peru. So one of the strategies that the state had to seize control over this region was the deployment of religious missionary communities to create these life frontiers. So this is how in 1953, the first cohort of Capuchin missionaries or of Basque origin arrives in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon. So this Capuchin order is a branch of the Franciscan order and attains to the same spiritual principles versed in the life of San Francis of Assisi, which is very close to this idea of nature. So the area assigned to these missionaries was initially named the Apostolic Prefecture of Aguarico, and then was upgraded to an Apostolic Vicariate in 1984. As the chronicles written by the Capuchin missionaries narrate, until the early 70s, the northern Ecuadorian Amazon was mainly inhabited by Naporuna and Guarani indigenous groups. Some factions of the latter hadn't even been contacted yet. Given the absence of the state, the missionaries became the main providers of education and health services and infrastructure as well, and significantly contributed to the creation of spaces for governance via the administration of populations and territories. So the decade of the 1970s is crucial to the development of the modern Ecuadorian state. In 1972, with the discovery of oil reserves in commercial quantities, the northern Amazon became central to a national economy based on oil revenues. Over the decades, the oil industry has gradually expanded, and nowadays, more than half of the Ecuadorian Amazon is harbors oil blocks, as we can see here. In more recent years, other branches of the extractive industry have emerged, such as mining and illegal timber extraction. So in this context, the preoccupation with the social and ecological vulnerabilities caused by the extraction of fossil fuels and mining had long been part of the Vicariate's agenda. So let's jump a bit to more modern times. And this is the encyclical Laudato Si, written by the Pope in 2015. So it's called Laudato Si, echoing one of the chants of San Francis of Assisi, on the care for our common home. So the Catholic Church has gradually positioned itself at the forefront of the global debates about climate change and the current environmental crisis with this encyclical. In Pope Francis' view, the care for our common home alludes to the planet Earth as the common ground that brings humanity together in a shared responsibility for its care. At a focal point of this proposal is the concept of integral ecology, that alludes to the inseparability of ecology from social life, politics, economy, and spiritual domains. Central to this narrative is also the formulation of ecological spirituality, an enlivened experience of the Christian faith in tune with environmental care. So one of the steps towards this renewal of the Catholic Church was the creation of the Red Eclesial Panamazónica, or REPAM. It's a Pan-Amazonic network of ecclesial jurisdictions that articulates the jurisdictions of the Pan-Amazon Basin in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, Brazil, Guyana, and Suriname. So this was created in 2014. Another very important event was the call for the Synod of the Amazon, New Paths for the Church and for an Integral Ecology, which was launched in October 2017 during a visit of the Pope in Puerto Maldonado in the Peruvian Amazon. And the preparatory process for this synod was led by REPAM and allowed for the first time in history the participation of lay people in the synod. In the case of the Amazonian ecclesial jurisdiction where I conducted my fieldwork, the care for our common home gained momentum with the advent of the Synod of the Amazon, the first about a region that was celebrated in the Vatican City in October 2019. Envisioned as a theological locus by the Pope, the Synod of the Amazon turned this region into a particular space and time in which the grace of God is revealed, calling for theological and spiritual reflexivity, but also for pragmatic responses. According to the Pope, the vast biodiversity harbored by the Pan-Amazon constitutes a visible manifestation of the divine, and thus calls Christians for stewardship. On the ground, I witnessed missionaries who I was conducting fieldwork with, introducing different reflections about deforestation, pollution, climate change, the use of pesticides, for instance, in their catechetical programs, sermons, public appearance, and their social media as well. So some of the initiatives in an institutional level were the organization of the Commission for Amazonian Integral Ecology, the celebration of the Ecological Palm Sunday that you have over here, and various campaigns led by the Social Pastoral Service, recycling campaigns or campaigns of reforestation. I will focus on one of the most visible and sustained actions that has been the campaign to suppress gas flares led by one of the missionaries. This is the case study that I'm going to be exploring today. So in broader terms, in this presentation, I examined what does it mean to be Christian in the Anthropocene for my interlocutors as consecrated ministers of the Catholic Church. I look at the narratives of the care for our common home and ecological spirituality from the perspective of theopolitics. So this is a concept framed by McAllister and Napolitano 2020 that directs attention to the pragmatic and ordinary sensorial and affective manifestations of socially and historically crafted theologies. So here I pay particular attention to the operation of theological insights in reshaping and mobilizing the missionary subjectivities to align with ecological consciousness. I propose the concept of ecotheopolitics to better capture the mediation of non-secular and religious conceptions of ecology that impinge on politically charged practices of the transmission of grace. I just wanted to point out my use of the terms non-secular, religious, and secular. So by non-secular, I mean like a set of practices, of discourses and practices that do not have like a precise religious affiliation, whereas religious is more like framed in the religious institutions such as the Catholic Church. Specifically, through my interlocutors' experiences of ecological spirituality, I examine the action of ecotheopolitical regimes in the production of new signifiers and the rearticulation of relations between human beings, nature, and the divine. So I will quickly provide an overview of the presentation. In the first section, I would focus on the main contributions of Laudato Si to the reorganization of the relations between humans and the natural world, by switching from a regime of domination to one of care and reverence. Then I will anchor these reinterpretations of the gospel of creation to the production of non-secular environmental subjectivities from the angle of theopolitics, and I will analyze how these serve as a base for my interlocutors' political activism. And finally, I will delve into the participation of one of the missionaries in the actions carried out by a grassroots organization called Apaguen los Mecheros, Enciendan la Vida, Shut Down Gas Burners, Light Up Life, to illustrate the mobilization of ecological spirituality and the narrative of the care for our common home in the political arena. So the first section. On our way to visit an indigenous community, Sister Carmen warned us about some recent disagreements among community members over the incursion of unlicensed timber loggers. Some members of the community supported economic benefits this would bring to the community, while others claimed that deforestation would have an overall impact in the communal land. Father Bruno saw in the Mass an opportunity to tackle these conflicts. The first reading, Mark 11, recounted the expulsion of the merchants and traders from the Temple of Jerusalem, when Jesus accused them of making the sacred place a hole of thieves. In his homily, the priest drew an analogy between the temple and nature. The merchants were expelled from the temple because the temple is a sacred place where people connect with God, and so it is with nature. The Pope is encouraging us to encounter God in nature. Nature is a site for spirituality, but if we cut down trees and allow merchants into our sacred territory, then we are destroying it. The common home is the entire creation, as Pope Francis says. The fact that we human beings are a creation of God's grace makes every encounter we have and every space we inhabit sacred. If we think of creation as sacred, we take care of it. If I believe trees are from God, I take care of them. If I believe the person next to me is sacred, I look after them. Creation is sacred because God manifests in it. Every creature is a sign of the gracious love of God for his creation. So I would like to highlight some aspects of the priest's speech here. And first of all, is like these contrasting notions of nature. So on the one hand, we have like this economic perspective, and on the other, we have this ecological, spiritual one. In the effort of this priest to dissuade the members of the community to engage with illegal logging and deforestation, Father Bruno presents these understandings as mutually exclusive. So he privileges the ecological spiritual notion as a vessel of grace in opposition to its commodification, which is the economic notion of nature. So one of the strategies used by the priest is what I call the sacralization of nature, in which the sacrality inherent to spaces such as temples extends to nature. Here, the term sacred alludes to care, reverence, and well-being, and is placed in opposition to the profanity of alienation, exploitation, and commodification. Another important aspect in this speech is the equivalence of our common home to creation. Also, the priest conveys the idea that the experience of the Christian faith is immanently tied to a form of ecological consciousness and activism. So from this angle, taking care of our common home or God's creation becomes a sacred responsibility and a transcendental practice that connects Christians to God. As I will explain in due course, at the core of this sacralization of nature is a mobilizer for ecological spirituality, lies the operation of ecotheopolitical frameworks. So these elements in the priest's homily have strong resonances with the insights presented by Pope Francis in Laudato Si. One of the key reflections animated by the encyclical is what my interlocutors considered a reinterpretation of the Gospel of Creation. In the first chapter of the encyclical, precisely entitled The Gospel of Creation, Pope Francis provides an extensive theological rationale focused on the rearticulation of the bonds between God, humanity, and nature as the cornerstones of Christian spirituality. As it can be read in the following quote from the encyclical, the Pope shifts humans' relationship with nature from a rule of dominion to a regime of stewardship. And I'm going to read this part that is highlighted in blue. That says, nowadays, we must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures. The biblical texts are to be read in their context with an appropriate hermeneutic, recognizing that they tell us to till and keep the garden of the world. Tilling refers to cultivating, logging, or working, while keeping means caring, protecting, overseeing, and preserving. This implies a relationship of mutual responsibility between human beings and nature. The care for our common home, birthed in this new Genesis, introduces a distinctive ownership regime in which the natural world, including human beings, are expressions of godly grace. From this angle, the ownership of nature is not outlined in instrumental terms or as an external object susceptible to be possessed or exploited by humans, but rather as a series of relations to be internalized and embodied in the form of care, respect, and contemplation. The sacralization of nature endows the natural world with subjectivity and the ontological status of creation, engendering transformations in the ways human beings relate to it, and reversing exploitative relations based on verticality and dominance. As claimed by Father Bruno's homily on the expulsion of the merchants from the temple, the ubiquitous distribution of grace in the natural world has the effect of decommodifying nature. According to the priest, the principle of interconnectedness that guides the Pope's formulation of the new Genesis implies that human existence is immanently intertwined with the lives and cycles of animals, plants, rivers, and soils. In other words, the reformulation of human and non-human relationships in terms of reciprocal dependence. Following Latour, I suggest that this approach reclaims the role of non-humans in Christian ethics and salvific ideologies. Another really important aspect of the encyclical is the inseparability of environmental justice and social justice, which also considers non-humans as neighbors and entails a transformation of this human sociality, interpersonal relations, and subject position, and a leaning towards awareness of and accountability to non-humans. Drawing on Sin's conceptualization of assemblages, I suggest that the principle of interconnectedness charted by Laudato Si treats creation as a non-secular assemblage, where the heterogeneity and diversity of agents involved affect and effect one another, producing social and political life via these implications. Following McAllister and Latour, I observed that for my interlocutors, Laudato Si emerges as a powerful theopolitical catalyzer of ecological awareness. The reframing of the gospel of creation casts the sacred as a mediator between humanity and the natural world by desecularizing nature, and as McAllister puts it, by extending its sacramental infrastructures to the natural world. In the form of creation, nature relinquishes its immanent status and becomes transcendental mediator and vehicle of grace. As I will show in the next section, I argue that by conferring this sacred rank or this theological status to the natural world, my interlocutors create and mobilize distinctive and non-secular meanings to water, trees, or soil that are otherwise conceived as commodities, especially by the Ecuadorian state and by the extractive industry. So these signifiers and modes of relationality rooted in theological notions that bring together humans as part of nature are definitely illustrate these ecotheopolitical rationalities. In the context of my study, these insights have not only served to position the vicariates and missionaries' religious discourse in the local public arena or push believers into action, but also to build alliances and assert the church's sovereignty beyond the domains of the religious. So the second section, non-secular environmental subjectivities. With experience of ecological spirituality, the encyclical argues for an ecological conversion of Christians. I contend that ecological conversion becomes a form of self-actualization, consciously tied to the environment and social relations as paths toward transcendence. I propose an analysis of what my interlocutors framed as ecological spirituality from the angle of the production of environmental subjectivities. And here I think anthropological scholarship is quite important from the different perspectives that it has been addressed. A growing body of anthropological scholarship envisages environmental subjectivities amid modes of collaboration between human and non-human assemblages, such as the case of Anna Singh, for instance, while other authors bring to the fore the coexistence of heterogeneous networks of human and more than human entities, as it is the case of political ontology. So we have Mario Blaser, Marisol de la Cadena, and Arturo Escobar here. From the perspective of political ecology, Martinez Alier recognizes the trend in environmentalism he defines as the cult of wilderness, in which environmental protection is tied to an intrinsic value of nature that sharply contrasts with economic valorizations. At first sight, this approach seems to resonate with Father Bruno's formulation of nature as creation in opposition to nature as commodity. Taking the operation of theopolitical regimes seriously, I suggest that my interlocutors' understandings and praxis of ecological spirituality rely on the incarnation of affects, senses, rationalities, and beliefs towards nature that are theologically animated and sustained. In other words, by focusing on the ecotheopolitical articulation of humans and the natural world, I propose a non-secular approach to ecological spirituality that captures, for instance, the use of Christian theological concepts of conversion to frame inclinations towards environmental consciousness. The subjective alignment is enabled by the belief that human and non-human constellations endowed with the divine grace are themselves inhabited by the supernatural, and therefore constitute a vehicle to forge and nurture alliances with the divinity. As discussed earlier, these conceptions are grounded in the reinterpretation of the Genesis and its landscape of interrelationality. So in this section, I will show, this is the case study of this association, how this ecological spirituality is enacted. Brother T is a Basque Capuchin friar who has been serving in the northern Ecuadorian Amazon for approximately 25 years. The missionary post where he is based at is located along Via Auca, a 90-kilometer-long oil road that concentrates a myriad of oil wells, gas flares, and other infrastructure operated by national and transnational oil companies. It also borders the Yasuni National Park, inhabited by indigenous groups in voluntary isolation. So if you can see here, this is Via Auca, and all the black dots are all the oil wells and oil fields that are like near the road. Brother T was one of the vicariate's spokesperson and participants in the Synod of the Amazon. He was also founding member of the group Apaguen los Mecheros, Enciendan la Vida, a grassroots association comprising indigenous and mestizo residents of Villa Auca and Sachas, two hotspots of the oil industry. This charismatic friar was mostly known for his active involvement in the campaign to shut down gas incinerators. For the ones who are not acquainted with the process of extraction of oil, so I would briefly explain it. So in the process of extraction, as we can see here, oil comes with water and gas, so it needs to be separated. So while oil is stored in these, as we can see here on this picture on the right, oil is stored in these steel tanks. Gas is burned through these gas flares. So the issue with this is that the incineration of crude remnants and residual gases such as methane and butane through gas burners is a common practice by oil companies. And I learned, like from my previous experiences, that it's not cost effective to implement technologies to make this gas profitable, mainly because like compared to, it's not found in commercial quantities, the gas, so it cannot be, it's not profitable in that sense, but it's also because oil wells are distributed irregularly, so they can, it takes a lot to gather all the gas from these oil wells that are like spread across an oil block. So these highly toxic emissions are propelled into the atmosphere and constitute a massive source of air, watersheds, and soil contamination. So according to Brother T, 447 active gas burners operate 24/7 in Villa Auca. He sustained that the prevalence of illnesses such as cancer, respiratory and digestive infections, and skin diseases in the local population is directly correlated with the proliferation of gas burners. On the 18th of February 2020, 9 girls between the ages of 6 and 14 years, supported by the members of the Apaguen los Mecheros Enciendan la Vida Association, submitted a lawsuit against the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Resources at the provincial court. The plaintiffs claimed that the governmental agency in question had failed to guarantee the constitutional right to live in a clean environment and infringed the rights of nature recognized in the 28th Ecuadorian Constitution. The association also wanted to raise awareness about the prevalence of cancer in the female population. Brother T considered himself not only a missionary, but also one of the many dwellers of Villa Auca who had been enduring the pollution for decades. The missionary saw in his membership and participation in the local organization as an opportunity to articulate his missionary call with the mobilization of the residents in favor of the care for a common home. He actively took part in demonstrations, campaigns, conferences, forums. He also attended hearings and accompanied all these grassroots initiatives. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit in March 2020 and the lockdown and the restrictions in place like reduces my chances to follow Brother T's journey, I turned to digital channels to track the unfolding events. Through videos and press releases shared in the Vicarate's WhatsApp group chat and on their social media, I learned that the 7th of May 2020, the judge from the provincial court dismissed the case, alleging its inadmissibility. With the legal support of environmental and human rights organizations, the plaintiffs filed for an appeal, this time in the National Constitutional Court, which brought the case to the public eye. By July 2020, when I was able to resume my visits to Brother T's missionary station, the case was already in the appeal phase. Despite the constraints in place, Brother T, along with other members of the association, remained vigilant throughout the process and paid regular visits to the provincial court to monitor the case. In the following fragment extracted from one of our conversations, Brother T expressed his motivations for participating in what he calls a campaign for life. Initially, my primary concern was the violation of people's rights to live in a healthy environment. However, I realized that not only people are affected, but also nature. Thousands of insects die around the gas burners every day. This means birds are left without food. If you visit one of these gas flares in the morning, you will see many dead birds around. You may think it's not significant, but it causes a disequilibrium in the cycle of nature. This constitutes an infringement of the rights of nature. My battle against gas burners is to achieve justice for people and nature. It is a way to raise awareness that we are all interlinked. We all have the right to live as creations of God. life is in the Amazon. We need to defend the creation of God. So I would like to highlight two key aspects in this discourse that illuminate my analysis from the angle of ecotheopolitics. First, I underscore how the missionary infuses this secular legal language of the rights of nature with the non-secular and religious connotations of the term creation. In this view, the advocacy for the rights of nature is analogous to the defense of the creation of God. Central to the friar's discourse is the depiction of nature as a sentient, transcendental, and enlivened entity that echoes Pope's exhortation to listen to the cry of the earth. In other words, putting forward the impacts of gas flares in the political domain was a way to render the cry of the earth intelligible and visible, translated into the legal language and political activists for the rights of nature. Second, and particularly relevant to the analysis through the lens of ecotheopolitics, is the appropriation and use of language by the friar and other agents associated with the Catholic Church, such as the Pastoral Service, Caritas, Repam, to frame their underlying motivations and actions, especially in the secular realm. The song United for Our Common Home, that I left it in its original language, authored by the missionary, became one of the campaign slogans chanted by the plaintiffs and participants during public demonstrations. So missionaries included these and other similar chants about the care for our common home with reference to the Amazon in ordinary masses and daily prayers, infusing these spaces with a sense of denunciation. This invitation to join a public demonstration in the provincial court was circulated in the Vicariate's WhatsApp group chat when one of the hearings was deferred. And this illustrates the particular use of terms and how these have been appropriated by theological categories consonant with ecological spirituality. We invite you not to be indifferent and join the fight of these 9 claimant girls, so that together we shout out that we are tired of being mistreated, violated. It is time for us to rise up as a society against the gas flares of death. Nature is dying. Pope Francis tells us that we are still in time. Let's put ourselves as defenders of life and defenders of the Amazon. Wake up, residents of Orellana. Come along and sing. The missionary church invites you to walk. A song for life, a song for peace. The earth belongs to all of us. We must take care of it, united as siblings, because she is our home. We ignite life. So the uppercase is in the original, and I think it was on purpose like to highlight these particular words. I noticed Broder T, another spokesperson, carefully avoiding framing the support of local churches and their participation in terms of anti-extractivist activism. Instead, their language, discursive vision, and tone recurred to a theological language and terms that were appealing to believers and that served to convey a message of hope as he manifested. A similar phrasing was invoked by the organizations affiliated with the Catholic Church, such as Caritas and Repam, in their public appearances and press releases. For instance, Caritas systematically resorted to the slogans such as No a la muerte, sí a la vida, eliminen los mecheros, mecheros de la muerte, or the appropriation of the name of the Apaguen los mecheros, enciendan la vida association to close their press releases. These mottos were usually chanted by the attendees in the manifestation accompanied by Brother T. I know that for church agents, these slogans are infused with theological understandings. In particular, the use of binaries such as life, death, defense, indifference, harmony, destruction, and the missionary's positioning on the side of life illustrates this point. The notion of life here does not only allude to the biological notions of health, but to a broader notion of life associated with the Christian God's capacity to create life. These theologically driven meanings and categories over which Christianity claims sovereignty illustrate the operation of theopolitical regimes as framed by McAllister. Brother T considered the mobilization and participation of the grassroots in the theopolitical project for life not only as a sign of Christian identity, but also as a long-term strategy that serves to articulate his missionary vocation with political activism. On the 29th of July 2021, the National Constitutional Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs in the appeal stage. The judge's verdict determined that the Ecuadorian state had failed to fulfill the plaintiff's constitutional right to live in a healthy and ecologically balanced environment, and to endorse the use of clean and environmentally responsible technologies for oil extraction. The sentence compelled the Ministry of Energy and Non-Renewable Resources and the corresponding oil companies to gradually suppress gas incinerators and issue a public apology to the claimants. The court also demanded that the execution of a plan for environmental reparation across the areas of influence. As of today, this execution of the verdict by the oil companies is still pending. So just to conclude, I would like to point out to how Brother T conceives this mobilization of grassroots and this articulation with non-secular organizations as vital for the mobilization of an ecological spirituality in this narrative of the care for our common home. And this is mainly to demonstrate that environmental care is not divorced from the social context. And this, the fact that environmental justice is close to or is the same as social justice in his perspective. It also demonstrates how the church has become a plausible agent in these debates around environmental crisis or around climate change. And it has like recovered a sort of, has become a political agent as well in this sense. And I think this also contributes to these non-secular understandings of nature and faith-based environmental activism. These networks, it could be another way of thinking these different networks of collaboration, as Singh calls it, in the face of the planetary crisis. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Natalia. That was so fascinating.